I admit, having a snowball fight shortly before you are supposed to spend the next 8 hours driving through freezing air was probably not a smart idea. We had all the blankets that Twain had picked up from Gold Bit wrapped snugly around us so we didn't freeze solid as the Marauders struggled to find traction on the road out of the city. Turns out, all the added weight from the supplies we sold was the only reason we had gotten there so fast. At this rate, I'm not even sure if the Marauder could get us to Red Wing by tomorrow night. The first hour out of the city, we moved at a snail's pace, the pip-up max saying that we had only went 20 miles. And as I looked across the open plains before us, a menacing wall of white blotted out the road a few miles up. It was a tremendous storm sweeping across the land, stretching wide enough that I bet it encompassed the entirety of the range around Full Mountain. What if we didn't make it in time? What if the storm slowed us enough to where we couldn't get there before 42's deadline? What if that's exactly what she planned? We had to try. And even though I could practically feel the apprehension of the others as the white wall approached us, even I started to have second thoughts. Maybe we should just head back to Tenpony and have Ditzy fly us in. She could take us over the top of it, right? The wind picked up to a dull roar, swirling like an enormous cyclone that I could feel starting to drag us closer, lifting the Marauder just enough so we lost all traction. We were left only to brace ourselves against the brunt of the storm as it smashed into us, giving the Marauder a jolt and slamming my head forwards against the steering wheel as the car shifted back and felt like we had been hit by a skybus. I wasn't sure if it was just the suddenness of the storm, the pain and ringing in my head, or the fact that my one good eye might not be working right, but it got dark outside as we were now past the outer wall. When the shock of it wore off, I had to squint to make out the others in the car. Longbow's horn glowed softly, giving me a point of focus as I was shivering in the cold, trying to burrow myself further into the blanket. The one piece of good news that I had was that with the winds pushing down on us, I could feel the wheels gripping through the powdery snow. I hit the pedal and started up again, using the compass and my augmented vision to guide us forward. The snow and wind were getting worse the further we traveled, becoming bad enough that even with traction, I had to slow to a crawl just so we could avoid simple things like boulders and dead trees. I've never seen a storm this bad in my life, and given the choice, would probably have chosen to take my chances in Canterlot for the goddess to have willfully driven into the storm. The moans and howls that came through the broken windshield sent my own brand of shivers up my spine, and I thought that some monstrosity would most certainly come charging through the blinding white at us. My pip-up blinked for a moment, and I thought it might have gone out again, but instead now displayed a small triangle just to the west of us. As the cold cut through even the blanket I was wearing, I was beginning to worry that not only would the pip-buck die before we got there, but so would we. As if it were a gift from the divine force of mercy, the front of us started to clear, and the light of day once again brightened the flurry of snow that whipped around us. With a jolt, we passed through the inner wall of the spinning storm. The form of the mountains rising sharply to the west of us had me confused. No, this was all wrong. The pip-buck confirmed that we'd been following the road west the entire time. There's no way we should have come up alongside the mountains this quickly. As I struck my head out the window and looked up at them, I realized something. The storm formed an enormous dome overhead that had been spinning in a clockwise fashion as we drove through it. If the winds were strong enough, maybe we had been swept into traveling diagonally by the strong winds. The peak of the storm dome wrapped around the midsection of Full Mountain, and immediately I knew that 42 had to be causing it. Somehow, she had made the storm happen. And whatever thing she was using to make it was on my list of things to break right after destroying the cloning machine. The thought that anything like this could even be made by ponies hurt my brain. Even the gears in my head refused to work at figuring it out, instead shoving the idea into my mind that I needed to figure out just where we were. I unbundled myself as the wind died down, pulling out my pip-buck and looking at the map. Once again, I was surprised at where we were. It was only another 10 minutes' drive to the old gas station we used as a rest stop, which meant that somehow the storm had pulled us nearly 10 miles in the short time we were stuck inside of it. Backlash. Longbow shivered and leaned over. We need warmth. I looked back to the others, who were shaking just as badly as her, and huddled close together. Don't worry. The gas station's just a few minutes away. We can huddle up there and build a fire. I gave a smile as I did my best to wrap myself up again, stepping on the pedal and getting us to roll forward. The gears in my head clicked together and gave me the idea that might help them cope with the cold for the short trip, using the hoof I had on the steering wheel to flick on the radio. Fillies and gentle colts. This was the voice of DJ Poem 3 that came through the speakers, and as unexpected as it was to hear, every pony turned their ears to listen intently. This afternoon, I'd like to talk to you about something a little different, instead of the news. Over the last month and a half, I have told you about the exploits and good deeds of the Wasteland Crusaders. Well, I'm here this afternoon to tell you that the Pink Mare has issued an ultimatum for them, to either give her what she wants at the town of Red Wing, or to join the battle for the town and fight her to the death. As this broadcast goes out to you, I know that some of you have family members who have chosen to help out in the embattled town. Some of you have stood up against the oppression and injustices in the wasteland and have been given the will to fight for it to be a better place. I'm here to tell you that at this moment, our very own Crusaders are out there heading for Red Wing. They are willing to stand next to every pony else and fight for what they believe is right, asking for nothing in return except a safer wasteland. Now I ask you, my children, is a simple merchant can cast aside his own needs to bring us the hope of a better life, even at the costs he's endured? Do we not owe it to be better ponies? Do we not honor the sacrifice the few make by committing ourselves to live by the example they have set? And though we may never see any pony like them again in our lifetime, as citizens of the Wasteland community, I ask you to remember those ponies who fight for you. The Crusaders themselves should be listening, and I wish you luck. We're all counting on you.
That was nice.
Longbow shivered as the soft tunes of the radio filled the air. The trail that led up to the abandoned gas station was so buried in snow that I almost missed it. I swung the Marauder around towards the hill and realized I wasn't even sure if she would make it up without any weight in the back. I shifted the car into park and turned myself to look at the others. All right, Heavy Pony. We don't have enough weight on the back tires to get enough traction required to climb the hill. Sky's the lightest of us all, so I need you all to get in the back frame of the Marauder while she drives it up. As the wave of groans and grumbles came from them, I cast off the blanket I was wearing and pushed myself out of the driver's seat window. As was becoming the norm, I slipped on it and tumbled muzzle first into the snow, stifling a scream as my burned half flopped into the waist-deep snow. Instantly my body began to shiver violently, making it hard to pick myself up from the ground and even harder to walk to the back of the Marauder. Should have warned more, Twin remarked through chattering teeth, as he looked at the exposed metal we had to stand on. Where do we hold on to? He looked up to me and gave a look as I was trying to read his concern, but it was hard to tell seeing as every muscle on him was twitching and shaking. Just pin yourself somewhere. I didn't exactly plan to install hoof hold on the car in the event that the trunk was ripped off by some psychotic pre-war mare, so I was at a loss as well. And the only reason the Rangers could stand back here was because their armor has the weight of it to not shift around so much, and the rubber tips in their legs keep them from sliding easily. Another 30 seconds is all it takes for us to cram ourselves as tightly as we can onto the steel beams. Myself at the bottom of the pile, pressed up against the frozen metal of the car, sitting only inches away from the snowy ground. My hooves hooked as best they could around the frame, while the others used me as a baseboard to stand on, which I would say is uncomfortable, but the heat they were radiating onto my back was simply divine. I heard a couple of bangs coming from the car as Carlotta tapped the roof, signaling Sky to go. As the wheels started to turn, I prayed to Luna that this would work, and that Sky wouldn't steer us all into a tree or something. Walking the rest of the way to Red Wing in this cold was not something we had prepared for. The engine roared out and pulled the Marauder. We picked up speed quickly, the extra weight giving the car enough to grip and get going at a good clip when we were up the hill. As we shifted angles, the others pressed into me and did their best not to be thrown back. The snow under us skimmed past as we climbed, the hill gently leveling out the further up we went, eventually reaching a point to where Sky thought we would be a good place to get back in. She stopped the car and put it into park, letting the engine idle as the others piled off me. I gave out a grunt and pushed against the frame to stand, but my chest wouldn't budge. I looked down and saw that the slightly bloody bandages around my chest had frozen to the frame, each tug bringing a sharp pain spike from my chest. Backlash! Get in! Longbow called out from inside, her voice only driving me to tug harder. A whine escaped my muzzle when one of the tugs brought a ripping sound to my ears as part of the bandage gave way. In the classically stupid move, I decided that this predicament was best solved like an adhesive bandage, and it worked out better if you just rip it off all at once. So I braced myself for the pain. I maneuvered my legs to push myself and tear free from the car. 42 already ripped an oxygen tank from my chest. How much more could this hurt? I stiffened up and pushed with all of my might, an intense tearing sound filling my ears as the gears in my head reminded me that I had been unconscious for the tank. This was a whole lot worse than a bandage. Flopping back into the snow, I let out a scream and grit my teeth, wishing that I could be numb for once. I writhed and coughed as the snow around me melted from the heat of my body and the water mixing with my blood and sending foul-smelling wisps of smoke up. I felt a pressure around my hind legs and was quickly dragged from where I was. A warm blanket that I had used in the car was draped over me as Carlotta and Longbow quickly wiped me down and wrapped me in it, holding their breath to avoid the smell. I let them help me as the world spun. I could feel myself getting picked up, quickly traveling through the air before the off-color of the Marauder filled my vision, and I felt the softness of the seat underneath me. I groaned as the pain in my chest burned like a wildfire, and I felt the wetness of my blood seeping into the blanket. As my head righted itself again slowly, the concerned face of Longbow sat peering over me, her caring eyes quenching the flames of my chest and bringing a smile to my muzzle. Then, as the shock of the event passed, the cold hit me all at once again, and I began to shiver. Skyline moved behind Longbow, propping herself on the dashboard as she squinted out front. Some pony has a fire up ahead. Maybe a half mile or so? She pointed her shaking hoof, and I did my best to wiggle myself up to see where she was pointing, finally righting myself with the help of Longbow's magic. Even with my one good eye and the dark swarm swirling overhead, I could see the dark smoke rising from the sky. That was the telltale sign of a bonfire. With a renewed interest, I turned myself on the seat so that I could steer again, shifting us into drive and stepping on the pedal to creep us forward. We wound around the small split in the forest that the road was on, following it for 2 minutes or so until I could clearly see the fire was from the clearing in front of the station. A dozen or so shapes moved around in the light, quickly shifting back and forth the closer we got. Friend or foe, it didn't matter. 42 needed me alive, so if they were her goons, they couldn't hurt me. And in the off chance they were friendly, they could help us get warm. The only issue is that if they were raiders, but at least that would be one hell of an interesting fight. As we rolled closer, the ponies ahead stopped moving, taking up defensive positions around the fire. As we came around the final bend, and I spotted a pair of armored ponies standing directly in our way up ahead. The shine of the plastic masks that they wore filled me with relief. At least we wouldn't have to have a fight. Then I tried to think quickly, reminding me that we were only safe as long as they knew or believed us to be the ones 42 wanted. And with a dozen ponies each training gun on us, that was one hell of a point I needed to clarify first. I pulled myself up and stopped 10 feet from the pair, who had their battle saddles trained on us, and seemed hesitant to make the first move. The one on the right took a step back as we sat there. I shut the car off and cleared my throat to tell them not to attack, but was cut off by someone I didn't expect. "Take what you want. I ain't with these ponies." Twain spoke up from the back as he raised his hooves in the air, slowly drawing all our looks to him in disbelief. What? I don't plan on dying today. Then you should have stayed back when you had the chance. I grumbled and turned back, watching as the two in front of us exchanged glances. We're the Crusaders. 42 wants us to arrive alive, so I suggest you put down your weapons and let us warm up at the fire. Oh, right. Twain blurted out again, leaning forward as he raised his voice. In that case, I am with these ponies. His quick move for redemption made me sigh and face hoof. He's one hell of a fighter, but dear Celestia, was he just annoying to be around any other time. The lead pony stiffened at the news, looking back to the other, who simply shrugged. The one in front whistled and looked around as nearly a dozen or more shapes rose from behind the fallen trees and various boulders out there. We had been surrounded and I haven't even known it. The lead pony shifted his mask off with a smile and pointed his hoof at me. You all are really the Crusaders. The same Crusaders the DJ is always talking about. He sounded far too excited to see us, and I was starting to wonder if 42 had put a bonus out for whoever brings us back to her. I simply nodded and stared at him quizzically, as his smile widened. Come then, and get yourselves warmed up. We're just about to start dinner. The overexcited stallion walked up to my window and held his hoof out. My name's Railspike. Welcome to the Resistance. We hadn't asked any questions about what this group was doing here, choosing instead to wait until we had warmed up a bit before figuring that all out. In that time, Railspike, who seemed to be in charge here, had a pair of mares treat and rebind my chest up while he was stirring a large pot of fairly good-smelling soup. So, Railspike. I broke the silence first, immediately drawing his attention. Why are you all out here? Are you refugees of Redwing? I hadn't seen any of the ponies in the standoff I had with Pariah, but I know that not everyone in town had gathered to stop us then. Railspike shook his head slowly. No. A few days ago we heard a rumor back home that the Crusader was probably going to help out with Redwing, seeing as you've been ending up where there's been trouble lately. So, quite a few of us decided to go fight with you against the ones sieging the town. I didn't expect you to show up so quickly, but I see now why you can get around so fast. He pointed a hoof at the marauder with a smirk. Last news I heard of you, you were on your way to fight the Pink Mare in Manhattan. Did you kill her finally? His words sank into me like knives, even if he didn't mean it. No. I looked towards the fire as my mind replayed the moments on the bridge, ending as I remembered the scared look in Skyline's eyes as I fell away from her. She's in Redwing now. This drew a laugh from him, scattering my train of thought. Well, damn. I had caps writing the fact that you'd kick her ass. The sheer astonishment that ponies could think that this was a sport they could watch from the sidelines infuriated me. But at the same time, wasn't it me who thought of this as 42's game? Guess I'll just have to do it all that I can to make sure you win the fight then. I looked back to him as he nodded to himself, glaring into the fire as I had been. Where are you all from then? Why are you risking your lives to fight? Longbow spoke up from beside me, pulling Rail's attention to her. He looked her over with a way that made me jealous, but it was not lust that was on his expression, but admiration. Me and the others, we lived out in Philly as part of a downtown scavenger group. I've kind of been promoted to the head of the settlement, and this lot are all the most courageous and loyal ponies I know. We know everything about each other, and they knew my mother lived out in Winey. He paused for a moment as sorrow flashed across his face, and the gears in my head started to spin. I lifted my pip-buck and flipped the SATS fuse to the administrative socket, flipping the notes page to pull up the one Brass had brought me. I hear you tried to save them. Thank you for having the courage to try when no pony else would. I stammered at the thought of what he had gone through. She left you a note. I held the pip-buck up so he could see it, his weary eyes softening as he pulled it close to read it. He smiled and let out a sniffle before slowly pushing my hoof away. Thank you. He wiped the tear from his eye and looked back to the fire. I don't have the money she promised, but I can fight for you that much harder with a clearer mind. As a voice of reason, I would like to point out that what awaits your group at Red Wing is an army, Carlotta called out from across the fire. And you will most likely be heading to your deaths if you continue with us. No offense, but 25 ponies with barely any equipment to their name won't be enough to make a difference, no matter how hard you fight. Railspike let out a quick laugh. Why do you think we have the masks? We had planned on being let in and then striking them when they least expected it. He had a hitch in his voice when he said that, as if he didn't believe his own words. The problem is, you're right. We're so under-equipped. There was a strong chance they would know it was a ruse and just kill us all on sight. But each one of us was ready to take that chance. He looked at me with a renewed look of hope. Both your arrival. There's no way they'll be looking too closely at us. Wait, what's your plan? It's just to hoof us over to them? Skyline poked her head around the fire. How the hell do you trust that you won't find some way to screw us over? Railspike sat and rubbed at his mane. How could we? I mean, if you showed up on your own, you'd just be escorted in. Not to mention, he said the pink mare was expecting you all anyway. Why not go in with us and at least have some backup if things do end up going sideways? It still didn't make sense to me. But why? Why risk yourselves in a fight you have no part in creating? At this, he dropped his brow and rubbed his chin. You know my reason, but I can only speak for myself. A lot of ponies have been following what you're doing, and decided that if the wastes were made safe again, we were going to have to work together to help clear that pink trash from the face of it. He shrugged and looked back at me. We all have our own reasons, and we know that some pony has to fix it. So why not us? If you all want to risk your lives sneaking in, then I have a favor to ask. I spoke up, sparking a glare from Sky as she slunk back behind the fire. Fortitude told me that she had taken the ponies of Red Wing hostage. If they're alive, I want you to get them out. He nodded as I talked, giving me a determined look. But I've heard her say this before. And you know what she did to the good ponies at Whiny. His face wore a grim look at that moment, and he took a deep breath. If there's any pony alive in there, I promise you we will do our best to get them out of there. He looked to his left as a dark blue mare strode towards the fire. Marrow, make sure the others know what I've said, and do a double check on their disguises. We'll get in just fine, but I don't know how long they'll be fooled once the Crusaders are escorted off. Backlash. Longbow put her hoof on my shoulder and leaned over to me. Twain was telling me that he grabbed every weapon in his shop, and anything that could be considered armor. Maybe they could find some use in it? I mean, we have more than enough that we can spare some things. Yeah. We aren't so much in danger of getting shot at with this plan, so anything that could help with getting the rest of Red Wing to safety is worth using. As soon as I'd said that, I found myself pulled into a tight hug, as Railspike squeezed the air from my lungs with a grin across his muzzle. You really are something. He laughed, feeling like he had ratcheted his hold tighter with each breath. I wish there were a way we could repay you for your kindness. I was starting to see stars as I wiggled my back hooves fugitively. You could start by letting him go. Carlotta acted as my savior once again as she appeared beside him. I felt him release me, and, like a great set of bellows, my lungs sucked in air with a high-pitched whine as they reinflated. I slid to the ground with a whump, and cringed as the cold snow pressed against my bandaged coat. I looked up at Carlotta's frowning beak as she stood over me, just watching me catching my breath. We gotta talk. Alone. She grabbed onto my forehoof and yanked me up, pulling me to my hooves before turning and heading towards the edge of the clearing. I followed quickly, turning and watching as Longbow gave me a parting smile and went back to staring at the fire. As I looked back to where I was going, I almost ran right into Carlotta as she sat down, staring out into the frozen forest. Even without looking at me, she patted the snow next to her. "Your wings look better?" For once, I felt nervous to talk to her, and I felt like this was going to be a fairly serious conversation. "They're shredded. Could take months until I fly again, but that's not what we need to talk about." She gave out a sigh. "As Skyline most likely told you, I had my reasons for wanting her to watch over Pallet." She began even before I sat down. The subtle twitches of a blank look and subtle twitches of her face told me that this conversation was likely going to be more serious than anything before. "I don't think I ever told you why exactly I took that job for Myron, did I?" "No, but I assume your reasons were purely your own." It was surprising how little I knew of the mercenary that dropped into my life a month and a half ago. My original joking at how she was part of my fucked up family then turned out to be true, and she grew to be my good friend simply because I could rely on her. I guess there is something to be said about friendships forged on a battlefield, and how even though I had never believed anybody else who talked about it, here I was today. I'm the youngest of 4 other hatchlings. I had 3 brothers and a sister back home in Vancouver, and as expected of the children of my family, we all joined the Talons. The hint of a smile crept across her beak as she remembered her home. We were all damn good Talons, but that was before the curse hit. I scoffed at the notion. "Really? You believe in all that mumbo-jumbo like Isaac?" She didn't move a muscle, but her eye glared down at me. "My parents took a contract to protect a merchant who needed to deliver some fertilizer to a tribe of zebras south of Vancouver. Turns out he was some pony purist and used the shipments as a makeshift bomb when he got there. Torched himself and most of the settlement." She shifted her gaze back to the forest. "They tried to do the right thing and help the zebra there, but they were sent away and the zebra cursed them. A month later, they were both killed when the building they were in collapsed while they were fighting. A month after that, Maris, my eldest brother, was killed when an empty refinery tank exploded during a mission. 3 months later, Rico was blinded and crippled when a mortar airburst next to him. And Rico died when another struck and broke her neck mid-flight. A building collapse is uncommon, but not unheard of, and refinery tanks are dangerous when still filled with fumes. But a perfectly timed mortar shell and a perfectly aimed dud striking 2 aerial targets, and all of these in the span of 5 months? Maybe their curse was real. Quilla was the lucky one. Through all this, she had her fiancé to lean on, but I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't stand waiting around to see the rest of my family die from this curse. Carlotta shook her head. I flew to Las Pegasus, changed my name, and made the job my life. No one I can care for can die when I don't love anyone, right? She looked back to me, and suddenly I could see the fear in her own. Then there was you. It was just another job, but your sister. She was beautiful, and she knew how to talk to me. I thought maybe with a different name and a different job, I could get away from it. But then there was Brass, and the fact that I almost died twice in the last few days. Those thoughts have started to creep back in. Now there's Pallet, and all I can think about is how much I want them to be in my family. But what if the curse takes them? I don't know. I gave a deep sigh and thought how yet again I wanted to just have Carlotta go and take Sky away. Once I'm inside with 42, you need to take her and go. Carlotta didn't even flinch at the suggestion. She won't leave before then, but you both can't risk yourselves when Pallet needs you both. I shook my head and face-hoofed. It was a stupid idea for you two to even accept Pallet when you knew where we were going. But that just means you don't get to die. I glared up at Carlotta. Curse or no. If anything happens to Sky and you are still alive, then you need to get her the fuck out of there. And you need to make sure she gets to die an old and grumpy mare. Do you understand that? Carlotta gave a stiff laugh and pat me on the shoulder. I knew you were in there somewhere, Backlash. I'm good to see the old you's back. She got up and walked back towards the fire, as I just continued staring out in the forest. This really was it, wasn't it? No pony expected to walk away from this fight. But if that happened, then it would be nothing I could do to redeem myself. I turned towards Carlotta as she walked away, trotting through the snow after her. So, if Carlotta isn't your real name, what is it? If we're going down as a family, then I want to know who to thank the goddesses for, my friends, in the afterlife. It's Hylia. Hylia Thistledown. She smiled to me as she said it, and for the second time in my life, I saw what a truly happy griffin looked like. Now, let's grab some grub. I don't know about you, but I skipped breakfast this morning, and I'm starving.